Okay. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Theatre 3. The reason I say that is because I've been hosting the talks in here, so I get to introduce myself, which is great. So I'm going to go straight into this talk. For those of you who've been to any of the other talks in this theatre today, you will see some common themes. I'm going to try not to repeat what you've already heard in terms of case studies and ideas and inspiration, but actually suggest to you some ways of thinking about how do we move forward, and in particular, how do we build forward better? And I'll explain what I mean by that. This is me. I will give you about 10 seconds to look at that, and then I'll move on. It's just to give you an idea that I've sort of been around in the sector for a long time. So I'm Stephen Spencer. I'm slightly upset because they keep calling my business Stephen Spencer Associates, and it's not. It's Stephen Spencer and Associates. And this is important. The plus sign is important. This is branding. This is storytelling, okay? First of all, we're and these wonderful people here. This is not all of our associates, but it's a selection of them. And we came together as a virtual consultancy, helping organizations to be the best version of themselves, to think about recovery, to think about doing things better and different, as Bernard was talking about earlier, during 2020. And it's very exciting because some of the associates I'm actually meeting for the first time today, here, but also some I haven't seen for quite some time. But the plus sign also refers to our positive compass, which is our diagnostic tool that helps us to understand and helps organizations to understand where they are now before they set off on the journey to recovery and to sustainable long-term viability. And it's also positive because we try to turn negatives and challenges into opportunities and positives. So what we're going to cover in this session is thinking about where we've been and what we've learned in the post-COVID era. If you were in Bernard's session, I won't be repeating what he said, but hopefully complementing it. Thinking about sustainability. In the write-up, which probably I did write and then didn't have a chance to tweak, you write these things many moons ago. You might all be expecting a talk on sustainability, but it isn't really that. But it is about how to be a sustainable organization for the long term. So hopefully that will satisfy why you're here. We're going to think a bit about innovation, because the way we move forward is through a process of innovation. And I think we need to understand what we really mean by innovation and how innovation works successfully and, again, sustainably. And finally, some ideas and techniques for doing that. So in terms of Stephen Spencer and Associates, we're all about creating life-enhancing post-pandemic destination experiences for communities, employees, customers, and stakeholders. We recognize some of the challenges. Again, you've heard about them today. You're well aware of them. Perhaps fewer customers, not less customers, fewer customers for the pedants in the audience or visitors than before. Or perhaps coming from fewer destinations with perhaps the tendency to spend more money. Less disposable income, that was true even, a year ago. It's definitely true now and going forward for the foreseeable future, as we know. New attitudes and aspirations. I don't have to rehash what they are. Hybrid working. This is a massive challenge for organizations where people actually like to work from home. Some organizations think they should be allowed to work from home. Others think they shouldn't. But how do you actually build and sustain a culture if your organization is dispersed in that way? And of course, the great resignation, the fact that people have chosen to leave jobs in hospitality and tourism, go and do other things. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I first heard that people were going off to drive vans for Amazon. I couldn't believe it. But A, of course, it's a growth industry, and B, perhaps they wanted to work social hours rather than unsocial hours. even if they had to pee in the back of the van, you know, and have lunch beside it. I don't know, I'm sorry about that. So where we've been recently, we did a virtual talk for the Museums and Heritage Show last year, and we reflected on the fact that these new issues were really hitting us front and centre. We see Extinction Rebellion in the Natural History Museum. We see the impact of Black Lives Matter on the way our collections are perceived, both in terms of how they were acquired and what's in them, and how we deal with that, how we talk about that, how we engage people in that. There's also the fascinating debate around, you know, is a drop in visitor numbers actually a good thing for the quality of the experience? I would argue it probably is. National Gallery, you may remember when they reopened, it was a curated visit, which meant, okay, you couldn't just wander around, but you also couldn't wander around just aimlessly in a rugby scrum. You actually got to have a curated experience that maybe was a different and better experience, certainly a different experience than you'd had before. And then in terms of ethics, you know, supply chains, where are our products made? You know, if we're talking about the gift shop, do we know where the suppliers are sourcing from and whether the employees who are making their products are being treated fairly and are having happy, sustainable lives and not destroying the environment around them in order to make those products? And also this whole issue of the future of the high street, which I broaden out to say, you know, it's the future of experience. What is it that's going to make people not stay at home and order all their stuff online and also spend the rest of their time on Netflix or playing games? Anyway, so along came this phrase, build back better, which, you know, we all say now, don't we? And there was this debate, you may or may not remember, about who said it first, Boris Johnson or Joe Biden. I don't really care, but I kind of objected to the phrase, not because of who said it or who didn't say it, but because it implied going back, trying to get back to how things were before. Do you remember how things were before? They were a bit rubbish, weren't they? I mean, I'm a customer experience specialist, and a lot of customer experience was rubbish. We were destroying the planet at a rate of knots. We were not treating people kindly or fairly. You know, growth was the only driver in the economy, and it was unsustainable. So how could things change? Well, during COVID, the RSA ran a survey which discovered, and if you remember the first lockdown, you know, if you were lucky enough to have a garden or a green space or a park, it was lovely, wasn't it? We were sat at home, the sun was shining, we were looking at the sky, oh, it's blue, and there are birds, and there are no planes, and nature is taking over. And the RSA found that only 9% of Brits wanted to go back to the way things were before. Of course, things change. You know, the habits of a lifetime are hard to break. And also, of course, the second lockdown, the weather wasn't very good, so we couldn't sit outside, and it wasn't so much fun. And then one of the first sectors to really boom as we started to reopen was garden centres. So I just could feel something moving here. There he is, Prince Harry, also calling on the tourism industry to build back better. And it seemed to me this was about, you know, this. Do you remember the image of the canals running clear in Venice after generations of being polluted by the cruise ships and other vessels bringing, you know, huge numbers of visitors to Venice? And then I was lucky enough to listen to, just before COVID hit, in February 2020, Mary Portas, Queen of Shops. That's not her, for those of you who don't know, that's actually Kate Moss, symbolising Topshop, symbolising Philip Green, and Mary was saying the opposite of anything Philip Green would do is the way we need to go forward. We need to be kind, we need to look after our staff, our customers, our communities, our supply chains. You know, we cannot pursue growth as an end in its own right because it's unsustainable and it's just bad. And that was quite, not to make a pun, portentous, I thought, because she was saying that before COVID and everything that's happened since. And the RSA, an organisation I'm involved with, some of you here may also be involved with, developed this, what they call their future change framework. And again, it, I think, resonates with what Bernard was saying earlier, if you heard him. Thinking about the things that we did because of COVID that we could stop doing and should stop doing. I mean, one of my pet hates now is still seeing those arrows stuck to the floor but sort of half peeling off, depicting a one-way system that it no longer is in force. So stop doing things we didn't have to do other than because of COVID. But do amplify and do more of the things we did because of COVID that were good. As Bernard said, you know, where we could just do something different that we might have had to spend months or years trying to get through bureaucracy, or we wouldn't have had the funding had it not been for COVID. Stop doing things that we used to do that were to no good purpose or didn't actually help us move forward, and we stopped doing because of COVID. Don't start doing them again. That's part of what I mean by build forward better. And do, of course, restart the things that we were doing that we had to stop because of COVID, but again, how can we do them better? And again, some really interesting thinking coming out around this time about, for example, the future of museums. This was a competition reimagining museums for climate action, and some of the entrants actually thought, well, would you have a museum in its traditional form if it's about sustainability? Because as Bernard said earlier, you know, people have got to travel to it. So straight away, is carbon offsetting really actually what we should be doing, or should we be doing something different? And I started to think, well, this is exciting because this is about museums not just documenting the past, but actually helping us to start shaping the future. As this guy, I believe, has done. I was lucky enough to have dinner with Tim Smith many years ago when I didn't know anything about the Eden Project. I'd been in Scotland for a few years, and I asked him, what's it all about? And he said, well, you'll think I'm very arrogant. And I did think he was very arrogant, actually, but in a good way. He said, I want to change the world. I want people to think that conservation and caring for the planet is sexy. And, you know, he's made it sexy, and now actually people in Scotland, as well as in the north of England and other parts of the world, will have the opportunity to engage in this way with the future of the planet. So in terms of my definition of sustainability, I'm happy to find that it's broadly in line with the UN Development Goals, and it's about all measures of the long-term future viability of a country, a community, a business, an organization. And I Googled, is sustainability just about the environment? And the quote below is from a recent edition of Forbes, and it's talking about the fact that businesses have to look not just at environmental sustainability, but at how they actually operate, and the consent that they have to operate, both with their employees, with their customers, with their stakeholders. And the thing I most like about the quote is it uses the word purview. So what is innovation? I was speaking to a guy who is an expert in tech innovation and finding investment for it the other day, and he said this: the problem with innovation is that people confuse it with invention. So it's not just, you don't have to be James Dyson, possibly you wouldn't want to be James Dyson. You don't have to be Steve Jobs. You don't have to invent something that nobody has thought of before to be innovative. What it's all about is actually finding better ways to do things that are, again, sustainable. So here's a quote that reflects what I call sustainable innovation. It's about applying better solutions that meet either new requirements, as in the world has changed, we need to respond. Inarticulated needs, that's probably my favorite part of that. Things that customers aren't necessarily telling us they need, but if we're intelligent and we know our customers better than they know themselves, and I'll come on to how we do that, then we can anticipate what they are looking for. Perhaps it's about the values that they share with us, and therefore we attract our tribe. And finally, existing market needs. So we're in business, we run visitor attractions or museums. People need toilets, they need a shop, they need catering. So how do we do that better than we were doing before? So in terms of the process, I think you start with why, the vision, the strategic goal, the big, hairy, audacious goal, if you're familiar with that expression, the thing that gets the whole organization focused and moving and excited. You saw a picture of me with the Queen earlier. I was very lucky to join the Royal Collection the year they decided they had to open Buckingham Palace to the public to raise £37 million to restore Windsor Castle. And we had one objective for 5 years, to raise £37 million to restore Windsor Castle. We could not fail, and we couldn't do any of it in a way that would in any way reflect badly on our boss. And so that organization's focus, whether we were curators, conservationists, marketing, commercial people, was one focus and one big challenge. And in fact, not only did we achieve it, but we achieved it 6 months early because somebody had the bright idea that, oh, actually, if we could finish 6 months early, it would coincide with the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh's golden wedding anniversary. So that would be nice. So we finished 6 months early, and the shop alone raised £6 million of that £37 million in 40 weeks, folks, over 5 years. So how did we do that? Well, we imbued, and you must imbue, in my view, to deliver innovation in a way that actually achieves your objectives, your values into your strategy and your process. So values is about, we've set our objective, we now need to do everything we can to authentically deliver that objective, taking the people with us that believe in it and want to be with us on the journey. And of course, we must have processes in place, project management processes, to ensure that we are making progress and we know how we're doing. And then finally, in terms of the what, well, the planning at some point translates into delivery and outcomes. And we measure that through KPIs. I know I'm teaching Granny to suck eggs here, but the important thing is this continuous live testing. There is always a tendency to strive for perfection before we launch something. Well, actually, COVID taught us we don't have to do that. Just get it out there, see who likes it, see who doesn't like it. I mean, the Wild West Museum, the Cowboy Museum, Carly probably knows where it is, I can't remember, but they decided, why did they decide to make their head of security in charge of their digital marketing? And yet it's been a huge success. So, don't sort of kind of wait till we've recruited a new head of digital marketing. See if somebody with a point of view that's a bit quirky or a bit different or a bit authentic could do your digital marketing. And the other point is deciding what not to do is really important. So prioritizing, having a really clear focus. Steve Jobs, you may know the story, he was kicked out of Apple. Apple got into a mess. He went back in. He said, we've got 400 product lines. We need 4. And there were 2 versions of 2 computers, one for business, one for personal users. And the rest is history. So it is about focus. And focus means knowing what your criteria are to prioritize. So we've developed something, Stephen Spencer and Associates, called the Innovation Toolkit to facilitate this process. And I'm just going to show you a very short video. It's 1 minute. Hopefully it has sound, because if it doesn't, I'm going to have to try and remember what it says. But anyway, here we go.
Customers experience brands physically, psychologically, and emotionally. This is what we call the 3D customer journey. And improving this journey is the most cost-effective way to boost your business's efficiency and profits. Forensically mapping your customer's journey puts you inside their mind, giving you the tools to excel at every stage and create mutual value. The results don't just benefit customers, Applying this approach made an attractions gift shop the most successful in the country, and engaging the team running a high-profile cable car operation delivered best-in-class results. In this new world, your customer's experience is more complex and more important than ever. Our Innovation Toolkit will help you take control of the journey and reimagine it to build forward better. This is the key to happy employees, loyal customers, and a sustainable future. Check in with us to start your innovation journey.
So hopefully some ideas that resonate again with what we've already heard today, really understanding the customer journey and how you deliver the brand proposition, the reason people come in every interaction. I mean, Matthew was very powerful talking about that at Beamish. Bala was very powerful talking about that at the National Gallery. Very often organisations kind of pay lip service to understanding how their visitors experience their offering, and particularly thinking about sustainability in terms of not just finance, although that's really important, but long-term commitment, whether that's expressed through membership or becoming a volunteer or a supporter or even leaving a legacy. How do we get that engagement? It comes through all those tiny moments of truth that actually deliver what they've come for. So understanding who they are, why they would come to you, and how you deliver it is critical. And we've seen already today the measures of how that is a successful approach. So Positive Compass, the first part of this, I mentioned the Positive Compass earlier, is a tool that helps to focus the whole team around an agreed view of where we are now, what is our core purpose and values. We might need to revisit that or refresh it or change the words, again, because perhaps it was up on the wall, but it kind of was a bit meaningless. Now it's got to have meaning. What are our challenges? But more importantly, how can we connect our core purpose and our strongest assets to audiences who want to support us, want to engage with us, want to buy from us? So in the second part of our process, we call it Experience Explorer. We literally explore the experiences that would ideally suit the customers that, sorry, I'm a bit lively with my hands, that we can identify our customers really want from us, or think about those inarticulated needs they would want from us if we created them. And finally, we map the customer journey. And all of these little ideas on the map there, which you saw in the video, represent the complexity. If I just give you a couple of highlights of what you're looking to maximize in the customer journey, there's the law of primacy, which is that the first impression, who knew, is incredibly important, and you don't want to spend the rest of the experience trying to recover from a poor first impression. Secondly, there's the peak end rule, which says that the peak experience and the end experience most influence how people reflect on their experience. So the peak experience might be the thing they've come for. You know, I've come to see the crown jewels. I've come to ride Oblivion. Or it might be that when little Tommy dropped his ice cream, a team member came straight away and not only got Tommy another ice cream, but took him behind the scenes to make his own ice cream. And that was the peak experience. And then, of course, the end experience. Bear in mind, that might be so simple as a member of staff actually looks up and says, "Thank you for visiting. It was lovely to have you here. Safe journey." Or it might be the toilets. You know, so think about what is that end experience going to be, because the memories that you create are what people reflect in their social groups and on TripAdvisor, and whether they decide that they want to receive your newsletters and become a member. So a couple of quick examples to wind up. I'm going to try not to give too much away here, because Market Hall Museum is a current client. One of the challenges they had was that they were formerly the Warwick County Museum. Well, everybody could understand that. But the Market Hall Museum, straight away, what is that? Well, as you can see, it's called that partly because it's in this very fine building, but you have to know that. Then also, we did some work around who are their customers. Now, to them, their customers, and I'm thinking specifically about retail and catering, because they have a shop and cafe at the front of the museum, which they want to become more of a destination. To them, their customers were just a load of people, load of faces, all merging into one. Believe it or not, I'm just going to show you one of the customer personas that they identified, but an important one. The Peppa Pig family, representing 30% of their visitors, with a high propensity for repeat visits because they like the fact that the kids can let off steam, there's some activities in the museum, while the parents enjoy the cafe. They came up with the Peppa Pig family, I didn't. And the reason was because they said they're really nice people. I didn't even know the Peppa Pig family is nice, but apparently they are. The serious point here is now that they think of the family audience as the Peppa Pig family, they have a common language to talk about that very important audience. They all are seeing the same family when they talk about them and think about them, and they can design their experiences in part for the Peppa Pig family. And I'm just going to give you a teaser here because their new shop opens in June. But we kind of thought, well, Market Hall, what used to go on in here? So the link between markets and retail, and then the idea, and we saw it with Beamish, of showcasing local producers, local food, local art, local design, local making, and retail theatre, too good to miss. So Market Hall Museum, Warwick, visit in June, tell us what you think. And the other one, this is one of my favourite stories ever, and it happened very, very recently, was running a workshop with the Museum of Farnham. Anyone been to the Museum of Farnham? No, I hadn't. I didn't actually even know where Farnham was. It's a beautiful little Georgian town in Surrey. So we talked about what their sort of core proposition was. Then we talked about what were their iconic objects. What was it that people sort of talked about seeing in the museum, remembering? And they said, well, we've got a cap that belonged to Charles I. I said, okay. I can't really picture that. Was it a flat cap? They said, no, it's a nightcap. So I'm now thinking Wee Willie Winky. No, this cap was given by Charles to the people that he stayed with in a house just along the street from the museum on his final journey to London to be executed. So suddenly, and Farnham was a royalist stronghold, there's a castle there. We've now placed Farnham in a historical context, in a geographical context of a journey, and also this cap was Charles divesting himself of his possessions and in quite a humble way giving them to people who'd helped him in a very simple way by giving him a bed for the night. And this is the cap. So it's also a beautiful thing. I went and found it in the museum. And so while I was looking at that and thinking this gets better and better, I noticed behind me there was a roof timber, taller than me, very ancient, actually from the 14th century, in the cabinet from the roof of Westminster Hall. And the reason it was there was because Westminster Hall roof was built in the 14th century in Farnham. And when it was restored in 1927, this is a more recent restoration, this timber couldn't be reinstated, so they put it in the museum. And I thought to myself, I'm pretty sure Charles I was tried in Westminster Hall. And he was. So he was tried under that very roof timber. So now we have this incredible story. And now the museum is talking about representing the objects, retelling the story. They have a Civil War gallery, but funnily enough, the cap wasn't actually in it. Really creating an immersive, powerful experience. And then, of course, the possibilities for retail, for events, and so on are endless. So it just goes to show when you actually focus on some of the things that you think you already know inside out, your proposition, the value you offer to your visitor, what makes you special, who are your customers, there is huge value to extract by revisiting it and really, really thinking about it. And the most important thing was about involving the front of house team in all of these discussions, because they're the ones that engage with and talk to and see the visitors and know what they're saying, know what they're thinking, know what they're interested in. They're not more important than the people back of house who support them, but they're as important. And as I think Matthew said earlier, this idea that commerce and visitor marketing and the experience are as important as everything else that we do is, one to really get our heads around in 2022 and beyond. So what to do now? Think about where we've been, but also where we don't want to go back to in 2022. Question everything. Review your purpose genuinely. If you haven't seen it, Simon Sinek's Start With Why TED Talk, you should see it because it's very powerful in making you think about how purpose translates to a feeling, that translates to a way of doing things, that translates to attracting people who get you and want to support you and love you. Clarify your prime assets. Again, that cap wasn't just a cap, it was an incredible story. Be irresistible to a specific group, so be really clear about who's interested in what you offer. Really understand who your audiences are now, they've changed, and where they are and how they'll interact with your museum in the future. Explore case studies and techniques for planning the future, but not just within the sector. Look beyond, look at what the really, really cutting edge immersive retail is doing. Look at examples of customer care in the health sector. Look everywhere, always beyond and receptive to thinking about, could I learn something from this? Be creative, be iconoclastic, have fun. We have a concept we call extreme customer treating, which is once we've identified our customer, or we've identified why they love us, what would be the most extreme version of how we could deliver an experience that they would love? And then how close to that could we actually get, and how could we do that in a sustainable way? Keep focused on your goals and prioritize against clear criteria. Remember Steve Jobs, knowing when to say no is as important as knowing when to say yes. And finally, keep your audiences and your key audience for any transformation journey, any innovation journey is your team, front of mind and at the heart of every decision. So where do you want to go? This is some of our lovely associates and toolkit guides who can help you on the journey. Do go and visit our partners' complete works on stand P2A just over there if you'd like to know more about the toolkit. But please go away thinking, yeah, actually, let's relook at what we're doing. Let's stand in our customers' shoes. Let's think about how they've changed. Let's think about the coolest thing we could do with our core purpose and our strongest assets if we really knew what our customers would love, and see how close to it you can get. So thank you so much for listening. Any questions? You don't have to ask questions. I won't be offended. Bala. Tom? Thanks.
Hello. I'm not. If I ask you, you can repeat if you like.
Yes, go on then.
So, in case that comes, there's no.
There is a question coming.
So, talking about building forward better.
Yes.
Which I love the concept. This is great, but that's quite a daunting task for an organisation because it's so big. So, what would you recommend as a small starting point in that process?
Okay, it's a great question. Obviously, in the process, we identify maybe 5 or 6 of these really cool ideas, really cool concepts that are very focused on what it's appropriate for us to be doing based on who we are and our strengths, based on who our customers are now and what they want, but actually let's prioritize on a fairly simple basis between effort versus reward. So, if we have to do something that takes a huge amount of work, but will pay huge dividends, that's a strategic objective, and we plan for that. Something that we can do with relatively low effort, but relatively low reward or low impact is probably a time stealer. Something with low effort, but high impact is obviously a low-hanging fruit. So it's very much about that prioritization process. And if you just move forward with one project, it could be a tiny project. How do we make our loos the best loos in the town? I'd love that if every museum did that. And then don't worry about people coming in to use the loos and they're not visiting the museum. Well, actually they are. And you might be able to encourage them to spend more time in the museum if they like the loos. So, it could be just one project that reels them in.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. If you wouldn't mind vacating the theatre now, because we'll clear the room and then start again for the next session. Thank you.